The final Talks with Practitioners series. We've been having great conversations with different artists who are performing and facilitating workshops here all this week. My name is Matt Wood and I'm the Engagement Director, and today I'm delighted to have Headstrung Puppets. Please join me in welcoming them. It's Ailey and Becky, but Headstrung Puppets also includes other people as well, so you'll often see extra people joining you as you perform. I'd just like to start by getting you to talk about Headstrung, who's involved, and how that kind of collaboration works with different people who perhaps offer different things to the kind of Headstrung project.
Right. Go for it. So we didn't start out as Headstrung, we didn't plan to start a company, but we started making work in Liverpool, which is where we're still based, in around 2009, and there were quite a few people at the time who were interested in making puppets, performing with puppets, anything around puppetry. So we all got together and we started cabaret nights as something that we could do fairly easily with short pieces. And it was all quite informal, a lot of energy, lots of different people, putting on sort of every couple of months, putting on cabaret nights and trying things out. And during that time we got to work with lots of different people and try out lots of different ideas. And we were talking before, and we're very much an ideas-led company, I think. I think we have ideas of what we'd like to do, and then we think, okay, how do we do it? Who's it for? What do we need to make? And that's all. What experience do we want the audience to have? And that's always the driving force. And then that became a little bit. We're doing it for no money, so we're doing a small fee on the door, so we could get lots of people in. And it was great, but hard to sustain over a long period of time. And then a few of us sort of began making more work out of the crew. So Katie Ann, who works with us still now, she works as a performer with us. Now, but at the time, the three of us came together and started making work and taking out work. And cabaret was where we started. We started doing adult cabaret with individual acts. We've got knife thrower. We've got male dancers, so strippers basically, and we've got a fire breather. And we were sort of adding to our repertoire of acts. And it was very much sort of someone would come in and say, I want to make strippers called Funky Love Muscle, or I want to make this, or I want to make that, and it was to entertain ourselves and because we really wanted to do it. And I think that's still where our work comes from. And there's something really joyous and lovely in that. Nobody was asking for that work, so we just sort of made it. And the beast that's still in our show, we've got a big beast puppet, the costume puppet, and the original version of that was from cabaret, but there was no reason to make it. We didn't even have an act. I just became obsessed with, so I do a lot of the puppet making. I wanted to make this beast and I knew how I wanted it to look. It was similar to something else I'd made and I spent time making it. And then we had to find an act for it. So that's gone through, and that was in about 2010.
The first beast act was a performance poet.
Yeah, so first of all,
tap dancing, some performance poetry.
Performance poetry, and then Katie Ann is a tap dancer.
Sure.
So she wore the beast and did a lovely Singing in the Rain routine, which still happens in our cabarets. And now we made another beast, and that's in our show, The Cryptid Petting Zoo. So anyway, we carried on with that, and at a certain point, sort of around 2013, 2014, we decided to take it a bit more seriously, I guess, and sort of, we realised we were becoming a company, even though that's not what we set out to do. And so we sort of made it a bit more formal, and sort of put a bit more effort into it and sort of put a focus onto it and thought, no, there's something here that we want to explore. And we started to apply for funding and that type of thing. So we made a cabaret show, which we've since redeveloped again, which is now the Freaky Sequin Puppet Cabaret. But we also take out individual acts occasionally still. And then we came up with the idea for the Cryptid Petting Zoo, which is the show that we performed here today. And as I say, we're very much ideas-led, I think, because we were doing adult work because that's what we wanted to do, and we were making work we wanted to see and wanted to make and having a lovely time doing it. And then the idea for the Cryptid Petting Zoo came in, and that is more of a family experience. We're still making something that we want to watch, so it's still for adults as well as children and for everyone to watch together. But that's why we're doing it. We didn't set out to make a children's show or a family show. And the Cryptid Petting Zoo, because I'm imagining most people haven't seen it, is so it's quite a high concept idea. It's the petting zoo format, but with I'm trying not to use the word imaginary creatures. Mythical creatures. With so cryptids are undiscovered animals, so animals not accepted by mainstream science. So Yeti, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, but also it brings in mythology, so things like dragons and fairies and things like that. So we've got a really sort of rich sort of area that we can mine for ideas, and also the segments of it have a little in common with cabaret in that it's sort of individual pieces brought together. And we've been developing that. We started developing it at Horse and Bamboo. We did the original R&D in 2014. Is that right? Yes, the short version. And then that's gone through several stages of redevelopment. We've been touring it as a bigger show since 2016. That's right, I'm trying to get all these right. And then this year we've just got funding to develop it again. And we've had experience of doing it in different places. So not just theatres, mostly not theatres, festivals, lots of different places, different types of audiences, indoors and outdoors. And we feel that we know what it needs now. So we're sort of thinking, well, what else can we do? And basically for us, that's what other ideas can we cram into it. So that's what puppets can we make? How can we surprise people? What would we like to see if we're in an audience? Things take time, don't they, to develop special puppetry. So the version that we performed today, we've done a little bit of development on. We've added in a few more, not completely new puppets, but we've remade and added in new ways to see the cryptids that we've got. And yes, the team that we were working with today, so there's another 4 people that we work with regularly, and 3 of them were here today, so it's a 5-hander, the show. It's quite big for a puppet show.
But it's well because the amount of ideas and the content of it,
and
you just
stuff.
need more hands.
Yeah. And what
And
happens
to keep it flowing as well, because you'd be knackered by the end.
and to keep ourselves entertained. It's very high energy, lots going on, lots happening, and it tends to be the style of different projects. Our projects differ, but for the Cryptid Petting Zoo, it's all about making it believable. It's all about people buying into the world. So we don't call them puppets. We wouldn't use the word imaginary. As far as we're concerned, from before you step into the theatre, they exist as far as we're concerned. And it's trying to sort of build that world for people and really bring them into it. But that does take, and we want to make it, big physically and then big ideas, and that takes quite a few people. So we've always got a van full of stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't got any of the puppets. I'm sorry, they're all packed in the van. But we end up with taking a lot of stuff everywhere. But I think we've come to realise, people have always said to us, they're like, oh, why don't you just have a suitcase? And, it's fine, or I've just got this, or I
came on the train.
Which is wonderful, and that's what's great about puppetry. You can see with the programming here and shows that it's so varied. And our style is a lot of stuff. That's what we like.
More is more.
More is more. And we've tried cutting it down, and we just can't. And it's what excites us, and makes us want to make the work, develop it, perform it. Does that answer?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of similarities in a way between the cabaret and the Cryptid Zoo, because you can kind of continually add on to them, and they've really we've seen them kind of develop into different shows, because it's now the Freaky Sequin Cabaret.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about kind of how, and you said that journey of how a show kind of goes from quite a primitive stage, and then the kind of decision to take it forward and make it into a bigger show, and are there challenges in that?
The thing with the cabaret is, because we call it a puppet cabaret, which it is, but it doesn't run like a regular cabaret, because you book different acts in, you take them separately, and then you've got a compare to tie them all together. And it is presented that way, but also it doesn't work that way, because we're doing all the acts for a start. We're also comparing the show as well. We found that we need to compare. So it's kind of, you want to keep that cabaret feel, but also it needs to be real, it needs to be slick, and you want to have that kind of play with the audience, but also, these changes need to happen at a certain time. So it's kind of always finding that balance. And I think that was a journey with the cabaret stuff in particular, in that we had the acts, and the acts have been kind of pretty much set for, you know, a good few years now. We've run them in, but it's always been about how does it tie together and how it runs, and that's when we got Alice involved to compare.
Yeah.
Because we tried it with a human compare, which worked, but also for poetry festivals it wasn't quite, it's like, well, why is this main character not a puppet? And it's always about that balance. I think sometimes the puppet compare works for some, and sometimes the human compare would work for another gig. It's all about the flexibility of it as well, but also keeping it slick and contained and manageable. So it's always about balance.
Yeah.
I think, for us, so certainly in terms of the cabaret stuff.
Totally.
And I think that you were saying about the format of sort of the small pieces strung together and the similarities. I think one of the reasons that works for us is it's bite-sized chunks. It doesn't feel too overwhelming. And I think that's when we started, we were like, oh, we can do that. We can do 3 minutes. It's only 3 minutes. We've just got to fill 3 minutes. And it takes the fear away rather than thinking, oh, there's an hour-long show. And you have to fill it. I mean, I think we have less of that fear now, but I think that's still in us. And I think as well, we might have sort of, I don't want to say short attention spans, but I think we like things that are constantly changing, constantly moving. So we make work like that. And of course, practically, it makes it a lot easier to start on just one thing. Because puppetry takes a long time to develop and get good. And then, you know, you've got puppetry and then you've got interaction with the audience. And then, you know, our stuff's very interactive. So we could have rehearsed something and rehearsed it, but until you get it in front of an audience and, you know, have that play, you don't really know how it's going to run, and it's really reliant on that. So we've tended to have a lot of different stages. And it's really nice. So there are certain events where we might try out a small idea, you know, in a cabaret, or it's something that's a scratch night, or, you know, have a play around at a festival, and then we go, okay, that bit worked, and then we'll spend a bit of time on it, and then a bit more time, and then a bit more time.
Brilliant. If anybody has any questions, do give me a little wave, and I'll go straight to you. We've got one here.
I just wonder, because you say you start with ideas, is that everyone? Or is that predominantly the two of you? And sort of how do you create a space within your company for other ideas, like other people to have ideas, and kind of how do you go from having that idea to then making it a thing?
Go for it.
I think at the moment, well, we're very lucky because the people that we work with, mostly we've worked with and known them for a long time, are all good friends as well. And we're talking about, I think practically, because we're getting more bookings and having to do more shows, we're talking about bringing other people in. And because we also tend to do sort of a run of, you know, a tour, a 2-week tour, it tends to be a show here, a show there, a show here, a show there. And everyone's very busy, so you can't always rely on people being free. So that's why we're looking at sort of like opening up to a bigger cast. But at the moment, it's the 6 of us. Basically, we run the company, and we sort of decide what shows we're going to focus on, sort of do the funding applications. I think decide which ideas we're going to look at, and come up with the sort of overall ideas. But we're always in discussion with everyone within the group, and I think once we get in the rehearsal room, then we really open it up as to it is really a collaborative process. So we would make all this sort of set pieces and the puppets, and sort of have a good idea of how it's going to run. But then in terms of especially the presentation, that's very open, and we're constantly sort of talking and examining what's working, what's not working, what we like, what we don't like, what we could have more of, what would make it more exciting. And now that we worked on it for a while, it's got a very definite style, so we know the world, and we know what we want it to be and what the rules are. So, and we've had experience of, you know, what works and what doesn't, so we're all sort of bringing that shared knowledge. But I feel like it's a really open space for discussion. We take, you know.
The show this afternoon, it wasn't scripted anyway. It all came out of the rehearsal. It was all devised by the entire company who worked on it. I think the initial one was a 2-week rehearsal process. Original. Yeah. I've just ended the week on it as well. So it's all devised. It's not scripted by any way.
But I think the only place that there are restrictions on sort of how much impact the wider group has The only reason there'd be any restrictions is just practicalities. So that obviously if we're the ones sort of selling the show and keeping it running, and we're the constants in there, and we're dealing with the money and all of those things, and we're committed to it and sort of giving it that extra time that it needs. So practically it makes sense for us to make certain decisions. And also in terms of the ideas, the Cryptid Petting Zoo, that was an idea that I sort of brought to the company, and then we've sort of developed it from there, and it's grown into something different. So we are probably more likely, or maybe I'm more likely to come in with a mad idea and say, I think we should do this. But we're always, it is possible that it could be someone else, or somebody will say just in a conversation, oh, I've been thinking maybe we could have this, or maybe we could do it that way, and a lot of ideas develop in the
Just
back
sheer
and forth.
volume of ideas as well, because
Yes,
that's one thing we're never short of is
that is the hardest.
ideas,
We've probably
because,
got another
the
few
2 hours,
shows waiting in the wings that we just. That's a lesson that we've learned, and I think that's partly why. I'm just trying to string this together in my head. Partly why it's good for us to focus on just one sort of act or idea at a time, or one little section, is because we've got so many ideas, and if we're like, oh, we want to make a show, we'll put this into this, and it's just overwhelming.
How do you manage that? Does someone take a kind of director role within the?
Yeah,
it's certainly for cryptids anyway.
Yeah. So you're kind of overseer of what's going on, and
and
give
that's
a bit of direction.
partly because I'm puppet making as well. So
how do they sit together, kind of puppet making and puppet direction?
It's a little tricky, I won't lie, because I am also performing in the show as well. So that's partly why it has to be collaborative as well, because in terms of my role as a director, it's more shaping the work, I think.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, you need someone to sort of make the overall decision, say, okay, well, we'll go with this. But I am in the show. So I need other people to direct me, and especially, with the puppetry, to be an outside eye, and to, it's a bit fluid and it's constantly, rotating around. Obviously you can film, but that fills in some of the blanks, but it's not the same. So we're sort of always directing each other in terms of the actual pieces and the, particularly on the puppetry, but also performance-wise, and we're sort of analysing what works and what doesn't. So it's not a process that would work for everyone, and it's not a traditional sort of process, but it's the way the show needs to work, really, because I really want to do all those roles.
We're also control freaks.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But we're all in house.
I'm sure us as festival directors
Yeah.
don't have that
Yeah,
experience
look,
at all. At all. We've got a question here.
I went to see the show today. I loved it. What sort of training, if any, do you have between you guys?
Well, this is this sort of links in with you asking what everyone brings to the project, because both of us, we're both drama graduates, and it was quite a general drama course. I started making puppets on that course, and sort of have been doing it since. And but so our roles aren't. We don't perform outside Headstrung, basically. So I would say that my strengths are probably in the sort of directing, the ideas, concepts, and then in the making. So I work as a designer and a puppet maker for other companies, and a lantern maker. So I make big puppets and I make small puppets, and that's my sort of other job. And then
See, I did the same drama degree, but I'm more tech-based, so I work as a techie as well, and a set builder, and I think from what I do, I like putting those two things together and see how we can integrate things, and constantly trying to play around with bits like that. So, and also, since it was together, between us both, we kind of got a lot of bases covered on that. But yeah, so we don't really work. Yeah, practically, so we don't really work as puppeteers outside. We do bits of stuff like that Liverpool Land Company.
A little bit.
But yeah, it's also, I think that's why we've kind of, it's developed a very definite style, I think, from that, in terms of how we have the journey we've come on, and how we do rehearse and practice and play.
And then the other people that we've brought in are more performance-based. That's sort of what they're bringing to the mix. But all of us have got a lot of different skills. I think that's something that binds us all together, actually. The people that we work with tend to be a little bit makers, a little bit performers, a little bit this, a little bit that, but then everyone's got sort of their own sort of thing that they're strongest at, and sort of it seems like a sort of really nice balance. But in terms of training in puppetry, I've done little bits of sort of training and courses here and there, but it's been mostly trial and error, on the job, talking to people, very generous. I found puppet makers and puppeteers to be extremely generous in talking about their work, which is really nice. And then the projects that I've worked on and working with other people and learning from seeing how other people do things, and then so trying stuff out with Headstrung, and then with other companies that I've worked with, and then watching other people's work, and that kind of thing. No formal training.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about a lot actually in these talks with puppetry. Sort of a lot of it is down to you've got to do everything in a way, which is great, but also big amount of responsibility, and just a lot to consider when you're putting together a show, that all these different elements and you having to manage that between you. Any other questions at this point? Before, because I want to. Did you have a word? No. I was gonna. Yeah, please.
I was gonna ask, what's like an average day in a life?
That's a good question.
Lots of coffee.
A lot of meetings for us.
Regular production meetings and planning. Lots of trying to get better at looking forward, planning forward, and
it really depends, which isn't a helpful answer, but it depends. Obviously we're trying to balance Headstrung with our other work. So sometimes if I'm being employed by someone else, making a big puppet or whatever, then that's where my head's at, and I might take 2 weeks out to do that, and likewise you've got your Unity job or you're working for other people.
But generally there's always emails to reply to.
So we're in contact a lot. And then when we're on a project, it'll be either making or performing or a bit of both. But when we're on a project, it's really, it's all consuming for me anyway. It's kind of making the evenings and sort of constantly thinking about it, and but trying to balance like all the emails and admin's really hard.
The admin is a full-time job in itself. Like you could spend your time, not quite happily, but you would.
Being a puppeteer is like 20% puppetry,
absolutely.
80% everything else. Yeah. Do you have another question?
Because I'm French, but I live in Australia. I'm interested in how difficult it is to find the funding, and how much time it takes outside of the artistry to just do all the paperwork for the gigs in the UK. I don't know, because in Australia you spend, I would say, 60% of your time just writing, and then when you finish the show, you have another 40% of the time to justify. So I'm interested to see if it is the same, or if it's a bit easier. Because especially with puppetry, because I know how puppetry is, it's for kids, it's not important. When in fact, we've seen magnificent shows for adults. And I mean, your show is as good as for adults as it is for kids. So, how is it in the UK?
Well, I don't know if our experience is typical of other companies or not, and that's why it's nice to talk to everyone about it. But we started out as a company who didn't get funding, and I think that's made quite a difference to us. So when we were doing the cabaret nights, particularly, we had no money. We weren't waiting on money to make work. So I think that's sort of in our psyche, and we made the work we wanted to make anyway, and then people saw it and went, oh, I might pay you for that, you know, it was that way around. So in 2014, when we've been working together for about 5 years, that was the first time we applied, and we were lucky we got funded. We've been lucky, we've had 4 or 5 successful bids, but we've had about 4 that got rejected as well, and it is really time consuming, but we don't do it all the time, just when we really want to redevelop something. We're very lucky in that we've been able to sell our shows, well now we get fees for our shows, so we're able to pay people, so we're not waiting for funding to be able to take the show out, which isn't the case for all theatre companies, I know, because we know a lot of theatre companies, both puppetry based but also not puppetry based, and they can't really tour without funding, so we don't take on performances that we can't pay people for as a minimum. We need to be able to get there and pay for costs, and to pay our performers. So what we need is money for development, because we just can't afford the time and the making costs. Well, time for making and you know, the practical materials. So that's when we apply. So that's why
that comes having a bigger cast as well, because like we could, like, if there's something that wants to do that maybe me could do, it's like, well, we're not get paid, but we can decide to do that because, you know, it will benefit us as a company. But when you've got a bigger cast, that you can't go asking them to work for free, because we don't do that to people, and you know, it's not fair, and they quite rightly would say no, and that's fine. So I think it's quite a good mindset to have going forward. As actually, no, we do need to cover people's costs. So,
but it has taken time to get to
yeah,
that place.
yeah.
And everyone who was performing today, and our other performer who's not here, Ash, they did all do developmental work that wasn't paid because they wanted to and they were interested in the idea. And none of us knew that we'd be getting as many paid performances as we are. Not that that makes it sound like we're always performing, but you know, we've been quite lucky, and we've got quite a few books for this year, and you know, it's really nice to be able to take out work that you love. So there was that period where people were, you know, working for free essentially, but yeah, we try and avoid that now because everyone's got to make a living, you know, and yeah, that's what. Yeah. But the thing I was going to say about that was we recognise their input into it, both in terms of giving their time in the beginning. But also, like I said, creatively, there's a lot of all of us in that show, so that's why we try and we do everything we can to keep that same cast, don't we? To the point of sort of, we've got quite complicated systems for swapping roles. So it's a 5-person show, and we've got 6 possible performers, including ourselves. And until recently, this is one of the things that we're going to change. The solution to that was me stepping into everyone's role. So I had to learn, you know, several versions of the show. And the reason for that was it's our company, so it's extra work. So it's not fair to ask other people to do it, so I did it. It was really hard going, so we're looking at better ways of swapping. Now we've got the experience. But yeah, it's, I don't know if that answers your question. It's not too... I don't know. I think it has got harder in terms of funding and Arts Council funding. We've only applied for small bids under 15,000. We've been quite lucky, but then also I forget about the times we got knocked back. You know, you only remember, you know, and other people as well. They're like, oh, you've been really successful. I say, well, yes, but also
they don't.
it's not all of them. You know,
Yeah,
just
they
over
don't
half
see them as
really.
successful ones,
You're gonna put that on Facebook.
But we try and try and balance the benefits of getting funding with the time it takes, because it is really absorbing. So sometimes we just don't.
I think we're not putting in funding bids just for the sake of it, because we should be developing stuff now. It's like, okay, it's a good drive to do it. It's like, we spend the money 5 times over in your head, like, you know what it's going to do to you. They also help with the writing application as well, and the drive to do it, and the balance
so
of it.
It's not sort of box ticking or oh, we have to say this. It's
when you really believe in it.
It's from a place of passion. It's like, no, we really need this money to make this work better, and we know that people are going to come and see it because we've got that experience and we can back it up. So. it's a tricky balance, I think. And then when it's little bits of development throughout, we put in our time to do that. You know, so if it's improvements on a particular puppet and I really think it's needed, or there's a puppet I want to, you know, if I've got a bit of free time and I could afford to give time to it, I will. But yeah, any bigger developments need to be funded.
Brill. Yeah, it flew past. It's past already. I can't believe it. Anyway, please join me in thanking.
Thank you.